Welcome back to another gripping tale of betrayal and redemption. In the quiet of Cedar Hollow, Washington, Wyatt Harper thought he had it all: a loving wife, Lila Bennett, and a cozy craftsman home built with his own hands. But at 41, his world shattered when Lila's cruel words at Thanksgiving. "You were just the mortgage guy," unraveled a web of lies. A single phone call exposed her affair with conman Julian Vance and their scam fleecing the town U.S. artists. What began as heartbreak ignited Wyatt's fight for justice, forging a coalition to dismantle their deceit. From pain to purpose, this is the story of a carpenter who rebuilt his life and Cedar Hollow's soul, one truth at a time. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, Oregon, Ethan Caldwell, 40, was a man who built things to last. As the owner of Caldwell Carpentry, a small but respected business, he crafted homes with the same care he poured into his marriage with his wife, Mia Reynolds. Their 12-year union had produced a charming craftsman-style home on Cedar Lane, complete with hand-carved bookshelves, a wraparound porch, and a backyard fire pit where they'd once roasted marshmallows under starlit skies. Ethan, with his broad shoulders, chestnut hair streaked with early gray, and warm brown eyes, was the kind of man who wore flannel shirts and work boots. Even on weekends, his calloused hands a testament to years of shaping wood into dreams for families across Willow Creek. Mia, 37, was his perfect counterpart, or so he thought. With her auburn curls, sharp blue eyes, and a laugh that could light up a room, she'd been a graphic designer when they met, helping Ethan brand his fledgling business with sleek logos and a website that drew clients from Portland to Salem. Their life looked idyllic: Sunday barbecues with neighbors, annual camping trips to Crater Lake, and plans for a family that never quite materialized. Mia had wanted kids early on, and Ethan had agreed, envisioning a swing set in their backyard. But as years passed, Mia's focus shifted. She opened a boutique art gallery downtown, Lumen Arts, showcasing local painters and sculptors. Her days grew longer, filled with gallery openings, client meetings, and weekend trips to Seattle for art fairs. Ethan noticed her phone lighting up with texts she'd quickly dismiss, her perfume lingering after late-night consulting sessions, and a new wardrobe of tailored dresses that seemed out of place in their small-town life. He wasn't the suspicious type. His work taught him to measure twice, cut once, but doubt crept in like damp rot in a foundation. The first real fracture came in late October, when Mia announced a week-long art expo in San Francisco. "It's a big opportunity, Ethan," she said, packing a suitcase with outfits he'd never seen. "This could put Lumen Arts on the map." Ethan kissed her forehead, wishing her luck, but a nagging unease settled in his chest. That weekend, while he was refinishing a client's oak staircase, his old friend Caleb Holt, a park ranger in San Francisco, sent a photo that stopped Ethan cold. It showed Mia at a candlelit rooftop bar, laughing with a man in a tailored suit, their hands brushing as they clinked wine glasses. The timestamp read, Friday night, but Mia had claimed the expo started Saturday. Ethan sat in his truck outside the job site, the photo burning into his mind. He built homes for others' dreams, yet his own was cracking under the weight of a lie. Ethan didn't confront Mia when she returned, her suitcase stuffed with expo brochures and stories of networking. Instead, he watched her closely, his carpenter's eye catching details he'd missed: the way she avoided his gaze, the new diamond bracelet on her wrist, the way her laughter felt rehearsed. He began to piece together the evidence, his heart heavy but his resolve firm. Mia's gallery was thriving, but so was her deception. She'd started taking photos of their home's interior, Ethan's handcrafted mantel, their bedroom's custom headboard, and he found them in her laptop's cloud, emailed to an address labeled consulting. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a violation of the life they'd built, turning their sanctuary into a backdrop for someone else's game. Ethan's hands, steady enough to plane wood to a mirror finish, shook as he realized Mia wasn't just drifting, she was planning an exit, and he was the last to know. Wyatt Harper's workshop in Cedar Hollow, Washington, was no longer a sanctuary. The scent of cedar shavings and the hum of his table saw couldn't drown out the image of Lila Bennett, his wife of 13 years, locked in another man's arms on that San Francisco balcony. At 41, Wyatt had built homes that stood through storms, but his marriage was splintering, and he needed answers. The photo from his friend Nolan Pierce, a park ranger, was his only lead. Wyatt's hazel eyes, usually steady, burned with a mix of grief and resolve as he sat at his workbench, his laptop open, determined to unmask the stranger who'd invaded his life. His calloused hands, accustomed to crafting dovetail joints, now typed furiously, chasing a digital trail to reclaim his shattered trust. Nolan's photo was grainy, but Wyatt zoomed in on the man's face. Sharp jawline, slicked back dark hair, and a smug grin that screamed privilege. The suit screamed money, too, tailored, probably Italian, out of place for a casual night out. Wyatt sent the image to Nolan, asking for any details. Nolan replied quickly. The man had been at the hotel bar, flashing a Rolex and charming the staff, but no name. Wyatt dug deeper, cross-referencing the hotel's social media tags from that night. A post from the bar's Instagram showed the same man, tagged as Julian Vance, a 36-year-old art investor from Seattle. Wyatt's stomach churned as he clicked through Julian West's public profile. Photos of gallery openings, private jets, and women in cocktail dresses, their smiles as polished as his veneer. Julian's bio boasted, curating beauty, building empires. But Wyatt saw a predator, one who'd set his sights on Lila and their life in Cedar Hollow. Wyatt's investigation revealed Julian's pattern. He wasn't just an art investor, he was a con man who targeted ambitious women like Lila, owners of small galleries or boutiques. His scheme was slick: charm them with promises of fame, fund their ventures with dirty money, then vanish when their businesses or relationships collapsed. Wyatt found a trail of broken lives. A Portland gallery owner bankrupted after Julian's investment. A Tacoma designer ghosted after signing over her shop's lease. Julian's empire was a house of cards, built on lies and funded by a web of shell companies. Wyatt hacked into Lila's email, her password, their wedding date, unchanged, uncovering messages from Julian. They weren't just flirtatious, they were strategic. Julian coached Lila on pitching Aurora Gallery to elite clients, urging her to leverage her assets, including photos of Wyatt's handcrafted home, sent as inspiration for a fictional investor. Lila's replies were eager, calling Julian visionary and promising full commitment. Wyatt's heart sank. She wasn't seduced. She was complicit, trading their marriage for a shot at Julian's glittering world. The betrayal cut deeper when Wyatt found a hidden folder on Lila's laptop, labeled Portfolio Expansion. It contained not just their home's photos, but detailed notes on Cedar Hollow's art scene, names of local artists, their financial struggles, and how they could be recruited for Julian's network. Lila wasn't just cheating. She was Julian's scout, identifying vulnerable women for his schemes. One email to Julian read, "I've got 2 painters ready to sign. They trust me." Wyatt's hands shook as he read, his workshop's warmth turning cold. He'd trusted Lila to build a life with him, but she'd turned their town into a hunting ground. Late at night, Wyatt drove to Nolan's cabin outside Cedar Hollow, the photo and emails printed out. Nolan, a burly man with a no-nonsense stare, poured whiskey and listened as Wyatt poured out his rage. "She's not just leaving me," Wyatt said, voice breaking. "She's selling out everyone we know." Nolan nodded, promising to dig into Julian's Seattle connections. Wyatt left the cabin with a plan. Expose Julian's fraud and Lila's role, not just for himself, but for every life they'd targeted. His marriage was a ruin, but Wyatt would build something from the wreckage: justice. The air in Cedar Hollow, Washington, carried the crisp bite of November as Wyatt Harper drove to Lila Bennett's family home for Thanksgiving. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, his hazel eyes fixed on the road, but his mind replayed the betrayal. Lila's embrace with Julian Vance, her emails plotting with the con man, her notes turning Cedar Hollow's artists into prey. At 41, Wyatt had built homes that endured, but his 13-year marriage was a facade, and tonight, he'd tear it down. His flannel shirt and scuffed boots felt out of place among the polished pretense he knew awaited at the Bennett family's sprawling craftsman on Oak Ridge Lane. Lila had insisted on hosting Thanksgiving there, claiming it was tradition, but Wyatt now saw it as her stage, to flaunt her new life and diminish him. The Bennett house buzzed with warmth, A roaring fireplace, tables laden with turkey, stuffing, and cranberry sauce, and laughter from Lila's parents, Evelyn and Harold, her sister Grace, and cousin Tessa. Lila, radiant in a burgundy dress, flitted between guests, her emerald eyes sparkling as she poured wine. Wyatt played his part, carving the turkey with steady hands, but his chest burned. He overheard Lila with Tessa in the kitchen, her voice low but cutting. "Wyatt's fine, but he's just the guy who pays the mortgage. Julian gets me. His vision's on another level." Tessa laughed, and Wyatt's blood boiled. Lila hadn't just betrayed him. She'd reduced him to a prop in her glittering narrative, one where Julian, the Seattle fraudster, was the star. Every smile she flashed at him during dinner felt like a knife twist, her diamond earrings, Julian's gift, glinting under the chandelier. Wyatt had planned his move with the precision of a carpenter. Before dinner, he'd texted Nolan Pierce, his park ranger friend, who'd been digging into Julian's Seattle network. Nolan had sent more evidence, screenshots of Julian's shell company transactions linked to Lila's gallery. Wyatt had compiled it all, Nolan's balcony photo, Lila's emails, her portfolio expansion notes, into a single file. As dessert was served, pumpkin pie sliced on porcelain plates, Wyatt excused himself to the study. His heart pounded as he connected his phone to the Bennett family's shared cloud, a system Lila had set up for holiday photos. He uploaded the file titled Truth About Lila and sent it to every contact in Lila's address book: family, friends, Aurora Gallery clients, even the Cedar Hollow Arts Council. He'd also tipped off a Tacoma journalist, Sarah Klein, about Julian's scams, mentioning Lila's role. The trap was set. Back at the table, Lila raised a glass for a toast, her voice sweet. To family, love, and new beginnings. Wyatt's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. Then it began. Tessa's phone buzzed, her face paling as she opened the file. Grace gasped, scrolling through the balcony photo. Harold's fork clattered, his eyes darting to Lila. Notifications pinged across the room, a chorus of shock. Lila's smile faltered, her phone vibrating on the table. She grabbed it, her fingers trembling as she saw the file. "Wyatt, what is this?" she hissed, her voice a mix of panic and fury. He leaned back, voice low but steel. "The truth, Lila. You and Julian, selling out our town," guests whispered. Evelyn's face crumpled, and Tessa read aloud an email where Lila boasted of recruiting artists for Julian. Lila stammered, "It's not what it looks like." But Wyatt stood, his 6-foot frame towering. "You called me a paycheck. You used our home, our people for his con. It's over." As Wyatt grabbed his coat, Lila's phone lit up with Sarah Klein's call, likely about the exposé. Guests stared, some leaving, others glaring at Lila. Harold pulled Wyatt aside, voice gruff. "I didn't raise her like this, son." Wyatt nodded, his rage tempered by grief, and walked into the night. Driving to Nolan's cabin, he felt the weight of his broken marriage but also a spark of purpose. Lila's world was unraveling, and Julian's would follow. Wyatt wasn't just exposing a betrayal, he was reclaiming Cedar Hollow's trust, one truth at a time. Wyatt Harper stood in the kitchen of their Cedar Hollow home, the silence deafening after the Thanksgiving chaos. The oak table he'd carved for Lila Bennett, his wife of 13 years, bore coffee rings from her careless mugs, a small betrayal among the larger ones. At 41, Wyatt's hands, rough from years at Harper Woodworks, gripped the counter as he waited for Lila to return from her parents' house. The balcony photo, her emails with Julian Vance, her notes exploiting Cedar Hollow artists, they weren't just cracks in their marriage but a collapse of everything he built. His hazel eyes, shadowed by sleepless nights, scanned the room. Their wedding photo on the mantel, her art books stacked by the couch, all tainted by her deception. Tonight he'd confront her, not to salvage but to clear the rubble. Lila burst through the door, her burgundy dress from Thanksgiving wrinkled, her emerald eyes wild. "How could you, Wyatt?" she shouted, slamming her purse down. "You humiliated me in front of my family." Her voice cracked, but Wyatt saw no remorse, only fury at being caught. He stayed calm, his voice low like a saw cutting through oak. "Humiliated? You called me a paycheck, Lila. You sold our home's photos to Julian, used our town for his scams. She flinched, but deflected. You're twisting it. Julian's helping Aurora Gallery grow. You wouldn't understand. You're stuck in this small-town rut. Her words stung, but Wyatt pressed on, listing her betrayals. The secret bank account, the late-night calls, the emails recruiting artists. You weren't just cheating, he said. You were his partner in crime. Lila's face hardened, and she snapped, Maybe I needed someone who sees my potential, not just a carpenter. The insult landed like a hammer, but Wyatt didn't waver. He pulled out his phone, showing her the file he'd sent at Thanksgiving. Nolan Pierce's photo, her emails, her notes. Your family knows. Your clients know. Sarah Klein's writing the story. It's over. Lila's bravado crumbled. She sank into a chair, tears streaking her mascara. I didn't mean for this, she whispered, but Wyatt cut her off. You meant every word to Julian. You saw me as a safety net while you chased his lies. He walked to their bedroom, packing a duffel with clothes and his grandfather's toolbox, each item a piece of the life he'd leave behind. Lila followed, pleading, We can fix this, Wyatt. I'll cut ties with Julian. He turned, his frame filling the doorway. You didn't just break us, you broke Cedar Hollow's trust. There's no fixing that. Wyatt drove to Nolan's cabin, the weight of his decision settling in. Nolan, pouring coffee, listened as Wyatt recounted the confrontation. She's not sorry, Wyatt said, staring into the mug. She's scared of losing her gallery, not me. Nolan nodded, sharing new intel. Julian's shell companies were under investigation, thanks to Sarah Klein's digging. Wyatt's mind shifted to the bigger fight. Lila's gallery was faltering. Clients had canceled contracts after the Thanksgiving reveal, but Julian's empire was still standing. Wyatt vowed to dismantle it, not just for himself, but for the artists Lila had targeted, like young painter Emma Tate, whose savings Julian had drained. He sketched a plan: connect with Julian's other victims, build a case, and ensure Lila faced consequences beyond shame. Sitting by Nolan's wood stove, Wyatt felt the ache of his ruined marriage, but also a clarity. His home with Lila was gone, its foundation rotted by her choices. Yet, like a carpenter assessing a wrecked frame, he saw potential in the debris, a chance to rebuild, not a marriage, but a purpose. He'd protect Cedar Hollow, expose Julian, and hold Lila accountable. The man who crafted homes for others would now craft justice for himself and his town. In a dimly lit diner on the edge of Cedar Hollow, Washington, Wyatt Harper sat across from Emma Tate, a 25-year-old painter whose dreams Julian Vance had crushed. The neon sign outside buzzed, casting a red glow on Emma's tired face as she clutched a coffee mug. Wyatt, now 41, felt the weight of his own losses, his 13-year marriage to Lila Bennett, their craftsman home, his trust. But Emma's story fueled his resolve. Her savings, meant for a Seattle art show, had vanished into Julian's shell company, lured by Lila's promises at Aurora Gallery. Wyatt's hazel eyes met Emma's, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. You're not alone, he said, sliding a notebook across the table. We're taking him down. This wasn't just about his pain, it was about Cedar Hollow's survival. Wyatt's mission began days after leaving Lila. Nolan Pierce, his park ranger friend, had connected him with Sarah Klein, the Tacoma journalist whose exposé on Julian was gaining traction. Sarah's research pointed to a network of victims across the Pacific Northwest. Gallery owners, designers, even a Bellingham sculptor, all women drawn in by Julian's charm and Lila's referrals. Wyatt reached out, starting with Emma, whose tearful call confirmed Lila's role. Lila said Julian was my big break, Emma said, her voice breaking. She introduced us at her gallery. Wyatt's jaw clenched, recalling Lila's portfolio expansion notes, listing Emma as eager, low risk. He contacted others, Rachel Flores, a Portland curator who'd lost her gallery to Julian's fraud, and Hannah Wells, a Tacoma weaver whose loan defaulted after Lila vouched for Julian's investments. Each story mirrored Wyatt's: betrayal, broken dreams, and Lila's fingerprints. The coalition took shape in a community hall in Cedar Hollow, where Wyatt, Emma, Rachel, and Hannah met with Sarah and Nolan. Wyatt stood at a folding table, his flannel shirt a stark contrast to the sleek lies of Julian's world. He shared his evidence: Nolan's balcony photo, Lila's emails, bank records, and a new find: a leaked contract tying Aurora to Julian's offshore accounts, signed by Lila. She wasn't just his lover, Wyatt said, his voice raw. She was his broker, selling our town to his scam. Rachel, sharp and resolute, added bank statements showing Julian's transfers to Lila's gallery, disguised as art sales. Hannah, quieter, shared emails where Lila coached her to trust Julian, calling him a game changer. The group's anger was electric, but Wyatt channeled it. They'd pool their cases, work with Sarah's legal contacts, and push for a class-action lawsuit. A shocking discovery deepened the stakes. Sarah uncovered an encrypted file from a Julian associate, revealing Lila's expanded role. She hadn't just recruited victims, she'd managed payouts, skimming profits from each failed venture. One email from Lila to Julian bragged, "Cedar Hollow's artists are easy marks. Trust me, I've got them eating out of my hand." Another outlined plans to phase out Wyatt's influence, suggesting he sell their home to fund her gallery. Wyatt's hands, calloused from crafting homes, shook as he read, the betrayal cutting anew. Lila hadn't just cheated, she'd weaponized their life for profit. Emma, reading over his shoulder, whispered, "She used us all." The coalition agreed. Julian was the mastermind, but Lila was no pawn. Wyatt left the meeting with a fire in his chest. He met Nolan at the diner later, where they mapped next steps. Sarah would publish victim stories, Emma would rally Cedar Hollow's art community, and Rachel would connect with a Seattle attorney. Wyatt's role was clear: coordinate evidence, keep the group focused, and ensure Lila faced legal scrutiny alongside Julian. As he sipped coffee, staring at the rain-streaked window, Wyatt saw his reflection. No longer just a carpenter, but a leader. His marriage was ash, but from it, he'd forge a shield for Cedar Hollow. Julian's empire would fall, and Lila's lies would bury her. This coalition wasn't just for justice, it was for redemption. Wyatt Harper leaned over a cluttered table in Cedar Hollow's community center, blueprints of justice spread before him. At 41, his calloused hands, shaped by years at Harper Woodworks, now traced a plan to trap Julian Vance, the con man who'd wrecked his 13-year marriage to Lila Bennett. The room hummed with purpose. Emma Tate sketched posters for a fake art exhibit, Rachel Flores typed emails, and Hannah Wells reviewed legal documents. Wyatt's hazel eyes, sharp with focus, met Sarah Klein's, the Tacoma journalist who'd become their strategist. Their coalition wasn't just fighting for themselves, it was dismantling a predator's empire. Tonight, they'd bait Julian into a sting, using his greed against him, while Lila's world crumbled under the weight of her own lies. The plan was bold. Rachel, posing as a wealthy Portland curator, had emailed Julian about a Pacific art showcase in Seattle, promising a $500,000 investment for Aurora Gallery, a lure tailored to his ego. Emma crafted a fake website for the event, listing Lila as co-organizer to ensure Julian's trust. Wyatt's role was riskier. He'd pose as a silent investor, meeting Julian at the venue, a rented Seattle loft wired by Sarah's tech contact, Leo Carter. Nolan Pierce, ever the steady ally, would monitor from a van outside, ready to alert authorities if Julian took the bait. A signed contract tying him to his shell companies. Sarah's exposé, set to drop the next day, would seal his fate, naming Lila as his accomplice. Wyatt felt a pang, picturing Lila's emerald eyes, once his spark, now clouded by greed. But justice demanded he press on. Lila's desperation was palpable. Aurora Gallery was bleeding clients, her reputation shredded since Thanksgiving. Wyatt had heard from Harold, Lila's father, that she'd been calling Julian daily, begging for funds to save her business. Sarah intercepted a text from Lila to Julian. "If you don't come through, I'm finished. Don't let Wyatt win." The words stung, but they confirmed Lila's panic. Wyatt's coalition uncovered more. Lila had tried to sell their craftsman home behind his back, contacting a realtor with forged documents claiming Wyatt's consent. The realtor, a Cedar Hollow local, tipped Wyatt off, sending him the paperwork. Each revelation hardened his resolve. Lila wasn't just complicit, she was doubling down, clawing to save herself at any cost. The sting unfolded on a rainy Seattle evening. Wyatt, in a borrowed suit, stood in the loft as Julian arrived, his Rolex glinting, his grin as smug as in Nolan's balcony photo. "Lila's told me about your town," Julian said, eyeing Wyatt. "Great potential." Wyatt nodded, hiding his disgust, and handed over the fake contract. Julian signed, boasting about his network, unaware of Leo's cameras recording every word. Outside, Nolan signaled Sarah, who alerted her legal contact, attorney Clara Nguyen, waiting with police. As Julian left, promising to seal the deal with Lila, officers intercepted him, citing fraud charges based on the coalition's evidence. Wyatt watched from the loft's window, his heart pounding, not with triumph, but with the weight of what came next. Back in Cedar Hollow, Wyatt met the coalition at Emma's studio. Sarah confirmed Julian's arrest, but Lila's fate loomed. Clara had filed charges against her for fraud and forgery, citing the home sale attempt and her payout emails. Emma, her voice steady, said, "She betrayed us, Wyatt. She doesn't get to walk away." Rachel and Hannah nodded, their scars fueling their resolve. Wyatt thought of their home, his carved table, now a symbol of Lila's greed. He'd lost his marriage, but gained a community's trust. As he stepped into the night, the coalition's plan clear, Wyatt knew the trap wasn't just for Julian, it was closing on Lila too. Her lies had built her cage, and he'd helped lock the door. The Seattle courtroom was a stark contrast to Cedar Hollow's warmth, its polished wood and fluorescent lights amplifying the chill in Wyatt Harper's chest. At 41, the Carpenter stood among his coalition, Emma Tate, Rachel Flores, Hannah Wells, facing Julian Vance and Lila Bennett, whose betrayal had gutted his 13-year marriage. Wyatt's hazel eyes, once softened by love, now burned with purpose as he adjusted his tie, a rare departure from his flannel. Across the room, Julian, in a tailored suit, smirked despite his handcuffs, while Lila, pale in a gray blazer, avoided Wyatt's gaze. The gallery buzzed with Cedar Hollow locals, including Nolan Pierce and Sarah Klein, all awaiting justice. Judge Evelyn Carter's gavel fell, and the trial began, peeling back layers of deceit that would redefine Wyatt's past and future. Prosecutor Daniel Hayes opened with a damning case built on the coalition's evidence: Nolan's balcony photo, Lila's emails, Julian's shell company contracts, and the forged home sale documents. Emma testified first, her voice trembling as she described losing her savings to Julian's scam, orchestrated through Lila's Aurora gallery. "Lila called me family," Emma said, tears falling. "But she sold my dreams." Rachel followed, her sharp tone detailing Julian's fraudulent transfers, with bank records showing Lila's cut, $50,000 skimmed from victims. Hannah, clutching a woven scarf, recounted Lila's promises of stability that led to her bankruptcy. Wyatt's testimony was raw. He described finding Lila's notes, her plan to sell their home, and her dismissal of him as just the mortgage guy. His voice broke on their wedding photo, now evidence, but he held firm. "They didn't just steal money, they stole trust," he said, locking eyes with Lila. She flinched, her emerald eyes darting away. Julian's defense was slick, claiming he was a consultant misled by Lila, painting her as the mastermind. Lila's lawyer countered, portraying her as Julian's victim, coerced by his charm. But Sarah Klein's exposé, entered as evidence, shredded their lies, detailing Julian's decade-long scam network and Lila's role managing payouts. A bombshell emerged when Clara Nguyen, the coalition's attorney, presented a new email. Lila had proposed expanding Julian's scheme to Spokane, targeting native artists, calling them untapped potential. Gasps filled the courtroom, and Harold, Lila's father, left in disgust. Wyatt's stomach churned, not just at Lila's greed, but at how she'd twisted their shared values into weapons. Lila took the stand, her voice wavering. "I loved Wyatt," she claimed, tears streaking her face. "Julian promised a future for Aurora. I got in too deep." But under Hayes's cross-examination, her story crumbled. He pressed her on the Spokane email, the forged sale, and her texts begging Julian to stop Wyatt. Lila snapped, "I had to protect my gallery." The outburst silenced the room, her mask slipping. Julian's smirk faded, realizing she'd implicated them both. Judge Carter's face hardened, and Wyatt felt a bittersweet relief. Not joy, but closure. Lila wasn't the woman he'd married. She'd chosen greed over their life. The trial's closing arguments left no doubt. Hayes called Julian and Lila parasites on Cedar Hollow's heart, while Clara urged justice for every victim. As the jury deliberated, Wyatt sat with Emma in the courthouse hall, her hand on his arm. "You gave us a voice," she said. He nodded, but his heart ached, picturing the oak table he'd carved for Lila, now likely seized as evidence. The jury returned. Julian was convicted on 12 counts of fraud, facing 15 years. Lila, guilty of fraud and forgery, faced 7. Wyatt left the courthouse, Nolan at his side, the Seattle skyline fading behind them. His marriage was gone, but he'd rebuilt something stronger, a community's resolve. The fight wasn't over, but Wyatt was ready for what came next. Wyatt Harper sat on the porch of his new cabin in Cedar Hollow, Washington, a modest structure he built with his own hands after losing his craftsman home to Lila Bennett's betrayal. At 41, his hazel eyes traced the cedar trees swaying in the spring breeze, their resilience mirroring his own. The trial's echo lingered. Julian Vance sentenced to 15 years, Lila to 7 for their scams. But Wyatt's fight had left scars deeper than justice could heal. His flannel shirt, worn soft from work, carried sawdust from a community project, a symbol of the life he was rebuilding. Cedar Hollow was mending, but the cost of Lila's greed, exposed over months of pain, still haunted its streets and his heart. The town had changed since the verdict. Emma Tate's art studio, once shuttered by Julian's fraud, now thrived, her paintings drawing tourists to Cedar Hollow's revived art scene. Rachel Flores, back in Portland, sent Wyatt updates on her new gallery, crediting his coalition for her fresh start. Hannah Wells led a weaving cooperative, teaching locals the craft she'd nearly lost to Lila's lies. Sarah Klein's expose had won awards, cementing Cedar Hollow's story as a warning against deception. Yet healing wasn't linear. Harold Bennett, Lila's father, had sold his home and moved to Tacoma, unable to face the town's whispers. Wyatt visited him once, finding a broken man who muttered, "I lost my daughter long before the trial." The words stung, a reminder of Wyatt's own loss, not just a wife, but the illusion of their 13-year marriage. Wyatt's days were filled with purpose. He'd joined Nolan Pierce in restoring the community center, its new beams carved with names of scam victims, a quiet tribute. Locals stopped by, sharing coffee and stories, calling Wyatt the man who saved us. He shrugged it off, his calloused hands more at ease with a hammer than praise. But late at night, alone in his cabin, memories crept in. Lila's emerald eyes at their wedding, her laughter over his carved oak table, now gone. He'd kept one photo, tucked in a drawer, not for love, but to remind himself of the truth he'd faced. A letter from Lila arrived, postmarked from prison, pleading for forgiveness. "I was wrong, Wyatt," she wrote. He burned it in the fireplace, the ashes a final release. The community's recovery mirrored Wyatt's own. At a town fair, Emma unveiled a mural depicting Cedar Hollow's revival, with Wyatt's silhouette among the crowd. She hugged him, whispering, "We're stronger now." Nolan, ever steady, clapped his shoulder, joking about Wyatt's hero status. But Wyatt saw himself differently, not a hero, but a carpenter who'd rebuilt from rubble. He'd started mentoring young artisans, passing on skills his grandfather taught him, ensuring Julian's victims like Emma had a future. His workshop, a shed behind the cabin, hummed with projects, each plank a step toward peace. As Wyatt stood at the fair, watching families laugh under string lights, he felt a quiet shift. The pain of Lila's betrayal, her dismissal of him as just the mortgage guy, her plot to sell their home, had forged him anew. Cedar Hollow wasn't just healing, it was thriving, its trust restored through shared scars. Wyatt's heart, though battered, beat with purpose. He wasn't the man Lila had married nor the one she'd broken. He was Wyatt Harper, builder of homes and hope, ready to carry his town forward, one steady step at a time. Wyatt Harper stood in the heart of Cedar Hollow's newly opened Artisan Hall, a converted barn glowing with string lights and laughter. At 41, his hazel eyes, once shadowed by Lila Bennett's betrayal, now sparkled with quiet pride. The hall, a project he'd spearheaded, was more than wood and nails. It was a testament to Cedar Hollow's rebirth after Julian Vance's scams and Lila's greed tore through their lives. His flannel shirt, dusted with sawdust, felt right among the artisans showcasing their work. Emma Tate's vibrant canvases, Hannah Wells' intricate weavings, and pieces from new talents Wyatt had mentored. This was his legacy, built from the ashes of a 13-year marriage, a foundation to ensure no one else fell to lies like his town once did. The Harper Artisan Fund, Wyatt's brainchild, had taken root over the past year. Funded by donations and grants Sarah Klein helped secure, it offered scholarships and workshops for Cedar Hollow's artists, protecting them from predators like Julian. Wyatt had poured his savings into it, selling the last of his old home's assets, save for his grandfather's toolbox, now displayed in the hall. Emma, now a mentor herself, ran painting classes, while Hannah trained weavers, their cooperative thriving. Rachel Flores, visiting from Portland, unveiled a plaque. For Wyatt Harper, who rebuilt our trust. Wyatt blushed, waving off applause, but Nolan Pierce, grinning beside him, whispered, "You earned this, man." The fund wasn't just about art. It was about resilience, teaching locals to spot scams and stand strong. Wyatt's mentorship had grown beyond the hall. He'd taken on apprentices like 19-year-old Jonah Reed, a sculptor whose family lost their savings to Julian's schemes. Jonah's first piece, a cedar eagle, stood at the hall's entrance, a symbol of hope. Wyatt saw himself in Jonah's drive, remembering his own start at Harper Woodworks. He taught not just craft, but courage, sharing his story of uncovering Lila's affair, from the balcony photo to her prison sentence. "Trust your gut," he told his students, his voice steady. "No one's just a paycheck, not you, not anyone." The lessons resonated, with Cedar Hollow's youth calling him Coach Wyatt, a title that warmed him more than any accolade. The town itself had become a beacon. Sarah's exposé inspired a documentary, drawing visitors to the Artisan Hall and boosting local shops. Cedar Hollow's story, of betrayal, battle, and rebirth, spread, with Wyatt as its reluctant face. He avoided the spotlight, but agreed to a single interview, where he spoke of Lila only once. "She chose her path, I chose mine." His path was clear, a life of purpose, not vengeance. He'd visited Harold Bennett in Tacoma, offering a carved cedar box as a gesture of peace. Harold's tears and his quiet, "You're a good man," closed a painful chapter. Lila's name faded from Wyatt's thoughts, her betrayal a distant scar. As the hall's opening ceremony wound down, Wyatt stepped outside, the night air crisp. Emma joined him, her smile bright. "This place, it's you, Wyatt. It's us." He nodded, looking at the stars over Cedar Hollow. The pain of Lila's words, "just the mortgage guy," had forged a man who built more than homes. The Artisan Hall, the fund, his apprentices, they were his Disan, a legacy of trust and strength. Wyatt Harper, carpenter and coach, had turned betrayal into a foundation for his town's future. With a final glance at the hall's glow, he walked home, ready for whatever tomorrow brought, his heart whole at last.